remove all the wires.
Yeah.
So I'm in there and I'm just doing my thing. And they were so happy to see me, by the way, because it was lunch hour rush. They had cars backed up around the building and they couldn't communicate. And it was just chaos. So I felt good. I was going to be the hero. And I'm working on that little toggle switch. And all of a sudden, it dropped out of my hands down onto the circuit board. And it somehow connected across the mains coming in. And everything inside that little box just started flaming. And smoke is pouring out into the restaurant and
Scott, thank you for joining me on the People I Know podcast. You're one of my first 5 guests, and I really appreciate you joining me tonight.
I'm happy to do it, Larry. Excited about it.
Scott has held a number of executive level positions in a rapidly evolving high technology marketplace focused on professional and consumer audio. His background and experience span global sales, marketing, product development, logistics, and establishment of global go-to market distribution channels. Scott has worked with and helped establish highly successful sales teams. Scott has an associate's degree in electronics engineering and a bachelor's degree in organizational management. He lives with his wife of 39 years in Niles, Michigan, has 3 children and 5 grandchildren. That's impressive, Scott.
All boys. All those grandchildren are boys, too.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
Keep us
That makes
hopping.
it good for sports outings during holidays.
Yes, sir.
If you will, tell me a bit about where you grew up, where you went to high school, and then college, if you would, please.
So I live in Niles, Michigan, and that's actually where I grew up. I grew up in Niles, Michigan.
Awesome.
When I was in 6th grade, my parents transferred me to a small private school in South Bend, Indiana. So we're kind of right on the border here. So South Bend, and that's where I met my wife. I started there at this school in 7th grade, and it was a real small school, but it was just big enough for me to meet the love of my life. So
there you go.
I got lucky there. But Niles is home now. I lived in South Bend for many, many years. I had a job transfer in the 90s that took me out east. So we moved the whole family out east for a little while, but then came back and now this is home. I'm a Midwesterner, I guess, just like you. You're from Ohio, so
That's
we're
right.
both
That's
Midwesterners.
Right. What's Niles known for?
So there, actually, believe it or not, there is a recording studio in Niles.
All right.
It's called Theory One Productions. It's owned by a friend of mine who's really talented, and he's kind of a big deal. He used to be the front of house engineer for Jimmy Kimmel in New York.
All right. Yeah.
And he records some very famous bands that come into little old Niles.
Awesome.
But, it's a very small town. We have the Apple Festival every year. So this is the fruit growing region throughout this area. So we got, there's a lot of fruit festivals. There's a blueberry festival. There's the apple festival. There's probably a peach festival. So it's just a good old Midwestern town, very down to earth, super friendly, people, just real nice.
Did you play sports in high school?
I did.
Which,
Um, so being in a small school, my options were limited, but it was all about basketball.
mhm.
So, but I'm only 6 foot tall, so but because even though I was sort of low, short in stature, I didn't have a lot of competition, so I was able to play. I was like a power forward. And I played basketball all through high
Awesome.
school. I loved it.
Excellent.
Just and just a little bit of soccer,
Hmm.
but we were always active.
Great. And where did you end up going to college?
So my parents, I had a great upbringing. My parents were awesome. We did not have a lot of money. You would say we were poor, but I never knew it. I
Hmm.
never felt it. I never ever thought that we had no money. That's how good my parents were because I had so much confidence as a kid. I never felt inferior, different, nothing. And but when it came to college, there wasn't a lot of money. So we and I was a mechanically inclined kid.
Hmm.
I was kind of a nerd. I loved tinkering with electronics. I loved taking apart motors. I had a motorcycle I'd fix all the time. And so my parents, to their credit, recognized like, okay, we got to encourage this kid to go to some place where he could, you know, sort of expound and then grow his natural skills. So I went to a small school called Valparaiso Technical Institute,
Hmm.
and I graduated there with an associate's engineering degree.
Yeah.
Now I work with a lot of engineers. They say, well, that doesn't count because I'm not a double E or anything like that. I might not have been smart enough. I don't know, but I got an associate's degree in electronics engineering, Tech. And then later in life, many years later, I had my kids, everything else. I went and got a degree in organizational management. I got my bachelor's degree. So I felt good about finishing that. It was very hard to do it later in life.
Yeah.
Anybody that's got their degree later in life knows how tough that can be, when you're working and you got kids and you're traveling. But I was able to knock it out. And I'm
Absolutely.
happy. I had a lot of support too along the way to do it.
What did your parents do for work?
So my dad was a machine shop supervisor. So he'd worked in a factory
Yeah.
and managed a machine shop. He was a supervisor there, and the manufacturing industry in this area sort of took a hit. It was there was a lot of churn. A lot of companies moved out of the area. So I remember my dad. He's passed away now, but I remember him uh, sometimes coming home saying, "Well, I got laid off today," and but even though that had to be extremely stressful for him, I still, as a kid and as a teenager growing up, when these things would happen, I never felt scared. And I,
Is it?
you know, it, and I tell my mom this. My mom's still alive, and I said, "Mom, you guys were struggling, but for whatever reason," and my brother will say the same thing. I have one brother. I never felt scared. I never felt like I was never worried about. I had everything I needed. There was just never any issue. So yeah, my dad was, and then my mom, she worked odd jobs. She was an assistant librarian for a while, and she worked for one of the local high schools, and she did secretarial work. So she was just doing different things, but mostly just staying home, taking care of us, my rowdy brother and myself.
I'm thinking about your dad. I think about Mike Rowe when you're mentioning what he did. You know, guys that have skills with their hands, there's always work. And I think there always had been, for sure, during the industrial revolution in our country. But even now, guys that are machinists or tool and die guys, there's a lot of work for them. And I think anyone who is good with their hands and just good people always had the ability to get the next job.
For
And
sure.
it
For
sounds
sure.
like that's what your dad was.
He was, he'd find something else. And nowadays I think there's a big lack
Mm.
of tradespeople, people that can go out and do this work. There's plenty of work in that area for people that want to find it. And my dad was good at a lot of things. And I remember growing up, he was always we were always working on the car together. And we We lived in a house. There was a little berm. I'll tell you this one quick story. There was a little berm out by the road, and my dad could park the car on that berm, and it would give us a lot of room underneath the car. So
Change the
we would go
oil.
in there and we can work on different things. And so there was always tools laying out by the road. And my dad had to make a run to the store or something. He goes, "Hey, just stay out here and watch my tools." And I said, "No problem." Well, I had this cockamamie idea that I would take one of the screwdrivers that was laying there and I would sort of tuck it inside my shirt and lay down there like I had accidentally stabbed myself. And so I was waiting for him. I was looking down the block, waiting for him to come around the corner. And when I saw him come around the corner in his truck, I laid there with the screwdriver looking like it was sticking out of my chest. And he pulled in the driveway. He didn't even put the car in park. He came out screaming. My mom had to reach over with her foot to break the. And I heard all the scream. I stood up immediately because I was scared. And of course, the screwdriver just falls out. I felt so bad putting him through that. Little kid stuff that you do, you know?
Yeah. My dad got me a go-kart, and it didn't have a clutch. It was direct drive. So it looked like a little, kind of like a slot car. And I was so eager to drive that thing. And we worked on it, finally got it running. And we lived next to an alley that went downhill, hit a road, and then dropped off sharp down a road called Pig Alley.
Okay.
So we were heading down, and I don't know really what the expectation was, where I was supposed to go or do, but he started pushing me, and that thing fired up, and I shot down the road like a rocket. And I remember smiling and looking back and watching him like run and trying to catch it. And the way to stop it was there was just a piece of metal that would hit the spark plug and short it out and kill the motor. And that's what he was reaching for. And I had my foot on the floor and I was gone. And he made one last attempt and missed it and ended up on his face on the road. And I took off down the road, turned into the church parking lot off to the right, was buzzing around there trying to figure out where he was. And he came walking down earlier, slightly bloodied up, but I think he still had a big smile on his face because that thing took off and ran just beautifully. But
And you weren't scared?
no,
You were ready to go. I thought you might be out of control, not knowing what to do, but if you were in control, no big deal.
Scott, I would say I've been comfortable being uncomfortable my whole life in one way or another. And I've always
Yeah.
enjoyed speed, so that was a lot of fun. So you get your associate's degree in electronic engineering. Then what was that first step into work in our industry?
So that's an amazing sort of funny story to me, anyways. So while I was at Valparaiso Tech, I had a side job as a janitor in the administration building. So I was up there every day after my classes, emptying trash cans, sweeping floors, cleaning the bathrooms. That's what I did to give myself a little extra spending money.
Yeah.
And I was in the dean's office, literally emptying his trash can. And the dean's phone rang, and it was a local company in Chesterton, Indiana called Commercial Audio Systems. And the owner was on the other end of the line, kind of in a panic, saying, "Hey, we just lost our tech. Do you have anybody there that knows a little bit about electronics and come help us out?" And I'm just emptying the trash can. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, there's a guy right here. Let me let you talk to him." And he handed his phone to me. And I pick up the phone and I have a conversation with the owner of this company. And she said, "Well, can you come over later this afternoon? I'll stay late just so we can talk." I said, "Yeah, sure." About a 20-minute drive, I drove over there and I got the job. So now I'm a part-time tech working for Commercial Audio Systems. And And this company, they were a traditional 70-volt
Mhm.
audio contractor. They did banks and churches. They did a lot of drive-through intercoms back in the day before wireless.
Yeah.
And and I just fell in love with it because it sort of blended my passion of just using my hands and the mechanical side of things, and plus the electronics. And it fit right in with what I was being trained for at school. So I just fell into this all because I was emptying the trash can in the dean's office. That's one of those things where you just get right place, right time,
Yeah.
and I just loved it. So when I graduated from Valpo Tech, I started working there full time
Awesome.
as a tech, driving around a van, doing maintenance calls and installs, and learning the trade.
Tell me if you remember when you were working on those drive-through systems, did you come across a ton of chewing gum on the ground where people would stop and talk and place their orders?
Oh my goodness, yes, it
I
was
remember that vividly.
on the ground, under the table, stuck up underneath the tables. My craziest experience was uh, so in the day we did a lot of McDonald's drive-through intercoms all around Chicago, everywhere. That was kind of a bread and butter business, just installing and servicing these intercoms. And back in the day, they were toggle switches. You push them down to talk and lift them
Mm.
up to listen because there was no wireless. I mean, I'm old. Let's just face it. And those toggle switches would go bad. You got a lot of use. There's a lot of sort of grease and oil in the air. And so I had replaced probably hundreds of them at this point in time. And I walked into this McDonald's somewhere in Chicago, I guess. And the plug to unplug the little box on the wall, I couldn't get to it. It was behind all these stainless steel counters and stuff. And I thought, well, I've replaced hundreds of these switches. I can do this, no problem. There's a bunch of soldering on the back of it to remove all the wires. So I'm in there and I'm just doing my thing. And they were so happy to see me, by the way, because it was lunch hour rush. They had cars backed up around the building and they couldn't communicate, and it was just chaos. So I felt good. I was going to be the hero. And I'm working on that little toggle switch, and all of a sudden, it dropped out of my hands down into the onto the circuit board,
Mm.
and it somehow connected across the mains coming in, and everything inside that little box just started flaming, and smoke is pouring out into the restaurant and out through the serving area. And I'm now frantically trying to find this plug. I'm moving things and shoving things out of the way. And I finally get it unplugged, but now there's smoke filled. And it was a very embarrassing moment and life lesson.
Yeah.
Don't take shortcuts. I should have taken time to unplug that thing. So I had to, yeah, I'd eat a little crow that day.
That's awesome. And from there, did you go to Crown?
Yes. I spent about a year and a half or so there after I graduated, and I was dating my wife at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we had gotten engaged. And my wife that I met in seventh grade, we had, she broke up with me, by the way, little side story, in eighth grade because I had body odor. And when you're going through puberty, everything's changing all at once. You're not sure what's going on, and I just somehow missed the fact that deodorant was going to be suddenly required in my life. So she wrote me a note saying, "Yeah, you stink." So she broke up with me, but we patched that all up. So we got back together, and then while
Old
we were in
Spice is
college,
a beautiful thing.
yeah, I take 2 showers a day now too. So I'm super paranoid
You're
about it.
good.
But we were friends. We were best friends. We stopped, the whole boyfriend girlfriend thing in junior high was, we were just good friends. And we both were dating other people. We came home from college and met one, and we thought, well, let's be more than friends. So we got back together, and so I was engaged now and working for this small company. And I thought, I think I need to go somewhere that's maybe a little bit bigger, maybe gives me more chance to grow a career in this industry. I already loved it at that point. And
Mm.
so was actually a connection through my mom who knew a secretary that worked at Crown,
Mm-hmm.
and told me about a job opening in their service department. And so I applied, and I was part of a stack of resumes there. And I called one day. This is another one of those, maybe call it a God moment or just being
Yeah.
lucky. But I called one day, and the HR person pulled my resume out and said, "Well, we don't have anything right now, but if we do, we'll let you know." You know, the kind of classic answer that you get.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it kind of put my resume on the top of the stack. And literally that afternoon, the service manager came in and said, "I just lost a tech who quit. You got anybody that's qualified?" And she said, "Oh, well, this guy just called. So why don't you talk to him?" And so I got the call, and I went in, and I became a service tech at Crown, and I took a cut in pay
Wow.
at that point. But I figured it was a good move because I was just my job at Crown started in April of 1987.
Mm-hmm.
I got married in February of 1987. So I had just gotten married and I started this new job with a cut and pay. So it was a little tough, a little tough to try to get through it. But that's how I got started. I started as a bench tech, and they
Wow.
started. You've got projectors I can see in your background, but they started me. Crown. Some people know this, but they used to make reel-to-reel tape recorders. That was
Absolutely.
one of
Yeah.
their first products. And so they trained me to repair those. They were still servicing them at the time. So I was reel-to-reel tape recorder, and then eventually started repairing amps, and I could repair everything they made.
What market were those reel to reels used in?
So the founder of Crown, a guy by the name of Clarence Moore, he was a devout Christian man,
Yeah.
and he supported missions. And he originally, and I might have the details, my brain's a little fuzzy now, but I might have the details mixed up. But he was created these tape recorders for language translation and in mission work.
Hmm.
So he designed. Um, there was a tube amplifier attached to it, so they were out using it in missions. I think that was the original concept. And he had his farm in Elkhart, Indiana, and he cleaned out the chicken coop. That's part of the story I remember. And he started tinkering and building these things in his chicken coop on his farm.
No kidding.
And so that was the first product.
Was he a minister or just part of the missions?
Part of missions. I don't think he was a
Good.
minister per se. He was just a real handy guy that had this farm.
Mm-hmm.
The company was not called Crown at the time. It was called International Radio and Electronics Corporation.
Okay.
But the name of the tape recorder was Crown, or the Crown Prince,
Ah,
reference to Jesus Christ.
interesting.
And so the Crown was the model name, but it became known as Crown.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually the company name became Crown Audio.
It was
And
just
then
we,
yeah,
we
so
we deal with a company on a daily basis, and they're going through that right now, where they had a name for the company, then they had a product, and now pretty much that product has become who they are.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that's probably very wise marketing.
yeah. Then Gerald Stanley came into the company. Gerald Stanley is a brilliant engineer. I think he went to Michigan State, and he brought this electronics engineering skill to the company, and he was the one that designed the DC 300.
I was going to get to that, but thank you for hitting
Oh,
that.
all right. Well, he designed this product, and it was, I think, the world's first high-powered solid-state amp. And the DC 300 sort of changed the whole trajectory of Crown. Eventually now it was designed. It was DC, so 0 to 20 kilohertz. So you could put a 1.5 volt battery on the input and get, I can't remember now, 30 something volts DC on the output or something like that. So it could be used in industrial applications. But then some guys decided to power speakers with it, and it was the best sounding amp out there, because of the way it just could push those drivers on the speakers. And so it just took off, and then that changed the whole trajectory, and Crown became a full on amplifier company at that point.
Do you know what year that was introduced?
Um, Definitely before my time there. I
Okay.
think it was in the early 70s.
So,
I want to say early 70s. I think they were building them. There was a fire at Crown, I think, on Thanksgiving 1972 that destroyed the plant.
no kidding.
Kind of a sad story in the history. But I think they were making them at that time. That's a good question, Larry. I don't remember exactly. I think it was early to mid 70s.
My recollection of it is that you they didn't die, and you couldn't kill them. And the amount of stories and pictures I have seen where an entire rack fell off the back of a truck or out of the back of a trailer, or multiple racks fell out of a trailer when it was going around a corner, and whoever was driving or riding with it picked them back up, put them in, took them to the show, wired them up, and they worked.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
Yeah, I remember hearing story after story that you just couldn't kill them.
Yeah, that's true. They would these stories would come in and Crown would retell those stories. I guess you'd call it marketing, but they would retell these stories and take pictures of, hey, this amp was sat in a pile of sat in a mud puddle overnight. They dried it out and turned it on, and it worked the next day.
Absolutely.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
So when you started, what was the premier amplifier?
So Microtech
Mm-hmm.
was kind of new to the scene. They were still making, I believe, they were still making DC amplifiers, DC 150, DC 300,
Yep.
but Microtech was a smaller form factor, higher powered amp, and so it. I remember seeing a lot of those. That was sort of brand new, and then Microtech eventually became Macrotech,
Mm-hmm.
and Macrotech became a premier amplifier for install and touring for many years.
I I visited there once, and I remember we were held up in the lobby, I believe, while the employees were having a prayer to start the day.
Yeah,
Was that traditional and normal each day?
yeah. There was a an optional assembly. I think it
Yep.
lasted about 15 minutes. And so everyone could take a break and come into this main room, and then somebody would stand up and say a little devotional and an inspirational message of some kind, a prayer.
Wow.
And that was just part of the culture,
Yeah.
because of the heritage with Clarence Moore and then his son Clyde, who was the president when I joined the company. Very good guy. And that was just a culture. Yeah.
And did that continue for a long time?
It did. It continued for a long time, and um, it was always optional. So it was not like in your face, and it was all low key. So it was very much accepted. It's like, hey,
Right.
I'm not. That's not for me. Okay, that's fine, and you were not judged for it. But I don't actually remember when it stopped. I think Crown was eventually acquired, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of the culture sort of changed. I wouldn't say necessarily bad in a bad way, but just things change. When you get acquired and new ownership comes in, there's always a different culture that's got to set in, and I think
Right.
that's some things changed.
So I was trying to remember when we met, and I believe it was while I was at Tannoy.
Might have been, and I think I might have been at Bose at that point because during the mid '90s I moved on from Crown and took a job at Bose, moved out to the East Coast, and then our mutual friend Daryl we met. It might have
Yes.
been during that time, Larry. I've been racking my brain too.
I think it was probably Play Network
Play Network,
that we
yep,
met through them.
yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Play Network was there was always such good people in that company and around that company. We'd all hang out and meet each other.
Absolutely.
And you know, that's probably when it was.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with them. And that it's great to be around companies like that are on the cutting edge, that are doing something different and unique, and you get to be a part of that spark and then watch it just take off.
Yes, for sure.
Hmm.
That's one
I
of the things about our industry, Larry, that I appreciate so much is that it's pretty small.
absolutely.
And so the people that you meet eventually become your friends, whether it be work colleagues or just people you associate with, like you and I, or your customers. Those are my friends today. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's my friendships, and I love that. And my competitors are my friends, my customers are my friends, my work colleagues, my former colleagues. That's my network.
Yeah, I think speaking for myself, I am incredibly fortunate to have so many great friends that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And I think it's always been what really drives me to want to do more and better in the industry than I have in the past is I want more friends like the ones I've had. And this industry is not short on good people. And for me, it's been a blessing. And I certainly have a lot more friends that I've met and grown that are in the industry than I have outside of the industry.
Yeah, same with me.
So LEA is your current company,
Yes,
and I'm not going to try to. I want you to tell me about it, how it was formed, and how it's doing.
sure. So yeah, LEA. So Crown was eventually acquired by Harman, and overall, I would say that that's a good thing. That was a good thing. The company, that infusion of all, this multi-billion dollar company coming in, and the expertise and just the experience and all these great brands. When you combine that with what we had at Crown, that was a win-win. And so the company got acquired in 2000. I was global VP of sales at Crown at that point in time. So I had grown my little my tech job, and had a lot of mentors along the way. By the way, is not me. I had people helping me and giving me chances. But became part of the Harmon family in 2000, and spent 18 years there.
Wow.
And the Crown grew. I grew within it. I learned a lot. There was a lot of challenges. I learned a lot, clashing cultures and how to manage all that, and just made a lot of mistakes along the way, but learned a lot along the way too.
Sure, sure.
Um, Eventually, for some sound business reasons, you never can argue about these things, but the Crown facility was closed in northern Indiana, Elkhart, where Crown was based. And so manufacturing moved, the engineering teams were moved, so things were dissolved there. Well, LEA founder Blake Augsburger was the former president of Crown. So he was brought in to be the president of Crown after the acquisition by Harman. So he was the first person to run the company after the acquisition. So Blake became my boss in 2000. So I've known him now for 26 years.
Wow.
Blake ran Crown very successfully, and then he ran Harman Pro very successfully, and eventually semi-retired right around 2016. Well, it was shortly after that the announcement came out that Crown was going to close in Elkhart, Indiana. And so Blake wrote the business plan to start LEA.
Hmm.
He just thought, well, I know this company, I know the industry, I know the people, he's lived in this area and managed it for so long. So Blake is the owner of LEA. He founded it. And the idea was to hire these super talented engineers that were now suddenly available and create something. And there was the goal wasn't to be just another amplifier company. That was not the goal. We thought, well, the world, has a lot of amplifier companies, a lot of good ones. We need to do something different. So the idea was to create a technology company with a cloud-based amplifier, something that was really quite different. That was
Hmm.
all Blake's vision. And uh, I was fortunate enough to come on at the early days to set up the global sales network. So I left Harman on my own accord, and I always tell people Um, I've had people quit. If people work for me quit. I've seen people leave jobs and start new things. And my advice to everyone is, if you're leaving because you're running to something that you think is cool and exciting, that's a good reason.
Yeah.
If you're leaving because you're running away from something because you're stressed out and you don't like the work anymore, you don't like the people, like you're just going to run into the same problems.
Mhm.
Because that's not a good reason to leave. It's so when I heard about LEA and I started talking to Blake, I thought, oh, this is a cool opportunity that I'm going to run to. And it was my first time ever being part of a startup. It was quite scary. Leave sort of the mothership
Yeah.
and go out and have this massive sales momentum to nothing overnight. But it's been 7.5 years now, and I'm super grateful for the leadership, for Blake's mentorship, the whole being part of it. It's been challenging, but also exciting to see what happens when you put a bunch of people together and just be passionate about trying to grow something.
Yeah. What are some current incentives with the company?
So incentives in terms of what do you
Mar-
mean?
Market incentives, direction, new
Oh,
products.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, so we are LEA from the beginning has been installation focused. We don't make a touring oriented amplifier. We don't make a retail oriented product. So it's all installation focused
On
and
purpose?
on purpose.
Okay.
That was the idea because we built a technologically advanced amp, and so the retail space it wasn't really right for us. It's a little bit more commodity driven. That's not where we wanted to be. And the touring space, a lot of amplifiers and speakers are get sold together.
Yeah.
And so you can't, so it's a little difficult to penetrate that if you don't have, a package that you can sell. So the sweet spot for us was integration, both residential and pro commercial integration. And so that's really what we try to do. That was our focus. We make an amplifier that can drive any kind of load. So it's kind of a chameleon. It can drive 70-volt loads. It can drive 8 ohm, 4 ohm
Mhm.
directly speakers. So it's very adaptable, really easy to use. We're not we're not a commodity driven type of price point, but we're still competitive. So the price is where it needed to be, and so that was really our mantra that we tried to follow is, hey, this is a great, and the amplifiers were smaller at the beginning, so we started um, sort of building our base in the commercial sector. And
Mhm.
then as the amplifiers got bigger, we started growing into more pro applications, high performance systems, line arrays, driving line arrays, stadiums, those kinds of things. So that's how it went. And now, in terms of to answer your question, what I'm constantly trying to do, and what the company's constantly trying to think about is, where's our weak spots in terms of market penetration.
Yeah.
And so you look at things like cinema and cruise ships, and there's all kinds of the great thing about our industry, Larry, is that there's sound everywhere.
True.
You go to a small coffee shop, there's audio playing. You go to a theme park, there's audio. You go to a rock concert, there's audio. So if you think about everywhere there's audio, there's a spot for us. And
True.
so I never have a lack of options to go look for business. Never.
So what, thinking back about Crown and the type of company it was, what type of company is LEA?
So we're our own company. We created our own identity, but there's some core DNA that I believe never changed, and that is impeccable reliability and impeccable sound integrity, constantly innovating. I mean, everything is designed and engineered by our team. And so we're not trying to be a Me Too company. We're not trying to do, those are all sort of foundational elements that are there. The culture inside the building, when you're part of a startup, it's different. You're working.
A lot of
You know,
hats.
you're wearing lots of hats. For me, the pressure was, I'm spending our founder's money.
Yeah.
It's his money coming out of his pocket, paying my salary. So that puts, I'd say if you're a driven good person, that puts a lot of pressure on you because It's like, hey, I don't like that. I want to carry my own weight. I want to make my way. And so it's not, it's, you cannot hide in a startup. You're exposed. You got to carry your weight. You got to produce. You got to make something happen every day. And so there's still that kind of culture. Like you show up every day prepared to work, but it's also fun, especially in our sales area, where we are. We play a lot of music. We try to have some laughter and banter. We all get along really well. I'm really proud of the team that we put together.
Is there a
It's
company band?
there is no company
No
band.
company. All right. All right.
Yeah, we yeah, there are some musicians around, yeah, but we
Excellent.
haven't got that far yet. I guess we gotta get there.
Maybe it's at the Christmas party.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else you want to tell me about it? LA, LEA?
Just it's very gratifying to see something that you have a hand in building. That's, I
Absolutely.
guess,
Yeah.
the biggest thing. You work for a big multi-billion-dollar company. It's a little bit easier to get caught in the day-to-day routine and the emotions. I wouldn't say that I was um, just settled into my comfort zone, but it was really nice to be pushed outside of your comfort zone, because then now you realize, okay, where I was lacking in skills, or where I might have been a little bit complacent or maybe a little bit lazy. The way we work trade shows is totally different. The way we work everything is totally different. So it's a very aggressive sort of, hey, we got to, and now you look around and you see all these people that weren't there before. And you would think, as you grow and now you start making money and you're profitable and it's millions and tens of millions of dollars of business and growing, you would think, okay, I can rest back and okay, I can take it easy. But no, you look at all these people and you think, if I don't do my job, they're not going to have a job.
Yeah.
So there's still pressure like that you
Constant
have.
drive.
Constant drive, constant passion. I really try to. I take sales, and maybe you do too. It's a noble profession. It's not what I set out to do. I wanted to be an engineer, but it's a noble profession to have. And now, as we have younger guys coming in, and I'm mentoring people, I really try to impart the fact that, hey, you're embarking on a career that's noble. Don't think because you're a salespeople get picked on.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. That's part of it, but it's a noble profession. There are skills that you can learn, and we really try to teach those skills and uh, help our young people. I'm not getting any younger, and so we're trying to hire younger people that can come up and learn the trade and learn the customers and do like you and I have, build these lifelong relationships, which eventually is what makes the job fun.
Absolutely.
We're trying to do that.
I remember the day I stepped away from kind of the technical side, the engineering side, to management. And my goal that day was to stay educated to the point where I could hang basically in any conversation. So educate myself enough that I would always know what the conversation was about, what the capabilities technically were of a product, and being comfortable saying that's my limit. I understood you right to this point, and I've always felt like I've held respect of people for doing that. And I could tell you that through my career, I've changed through a lot of different technologies, and that's been the drive that I have really enjoyed, is just a constant learning and always having some type of challenge to learn and understand a new technology. But that is what's always kept me motivated. And I think that's one of the greatest things about our industry is we don't sell products that we sold 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago, and most likely not 2 years ago. And
Yes, spot on.
that's what drives everybody. And the markets that we're in, you mentioned cruise ships and theme parks. They don't want anything that everybody else has. They want something that nobody has, and that's the drive to build new and better products.
Yeah, that's true. Where everybody's, and not just us, a lot of great companies are constantly pushing the envelope with technology and trying to make things better. And it's a hard road, but we're fortunate in our business that we see a lot of these companies just continuing to push. But you're right, that makes it harder to keep up with the conversation. We got to be a mile wide and an inch deep on a lot of different subjects. We can go deep in a few areas, but it's okay to say, I don't know. People do respect that. You're right about that.
Very true. I know you recently had a very tragic loss in your life, losing your son, Riley. I'd like you to talk about that and tell me where it happened, how it happened, how you learned about it, and how you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was terrible. We a little over 2 years now. It's hard to believe. It's been a little over 2 years. It just seems like a blink. But yeah, I was at LEA. I was in my office and I got the call. Your son has been found deceased. So those are the words I heard. Your son Riley's been found deceased. So definitely that was the hardest moment of my life at that point. And you really, I remember sitting in the office thinking, okay, I do need to keep my composure here because I need to leave and I need to go find my wife and we need to, support each other right now and sort of process what we just heard. So that was very difficult to go through that. Very difficult. And I'm not the only one. We've since met a lot of people who've lost their children at a young age, and you know, there's a community out there. We're all part of this very unfortunate club,
Yeah.
and we became part of it. So yeah, we found out, and this was February 20th when we learned about this. So last time I talked to Riley, he lived in Denver.
Okay.
He was an amazing human being, by the way, just amazing, and just super good musician. I'm an engineer thinking person, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And but somehow my wife, we spawned this musician. He was so good. Drums.
Drums. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, drums was his main instrument.
Yeah.
And but eventually he could play anything. He could play guitar. He could play keyboards. He could play bass. He just had this natural sort of God-given musical talent, and it went right along with his personality too. He's just really outgoing, gregarious, could make anybody feel at ease, could have a conversation with you, doesn't matter, anybody, and be entertaining. He just had game that way. But he lived in Denver, which is where his older brother lives, and he had an apartment there. And he worked he was a shop floor supervisor at a woodworking factory.
Mm-hmm.
And so he loved woodworking. So besides playing music and being who he was, Riley, he loved woodworking. And so he got this job working out there, and they really liked him, and he worked hard at it. And he would ride his bike from his apartment in downtown Denver. He lived very near where the Denver Broncos stadium is. I forget the name of it, but he would just ride his bike to work because it was a bike path that got all the way there, and it was actually faster than driving. So his bike was his main mode of transportation.
Nice.
And so I talked to him on February 17th, 2024, and he was at work. It was a Saturday morning, and he was just jovial and happy as can be, and I could hear machines running in the background, and he starts telling me the story. He said, "Dad, you're never going to believe this. I'm riding my bike to work, and I just, out of the corner of my eye, I glance and I see this Coach purse lying on the side of the bike trail." And he picks it up, and when he opens it, there's all kinds of drugs in it. Obviously illicit substances. There's $110 cash, and he's telling me this story, and he's sort of just laughing about it, and I am too. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that. Well, Denver, there's a lot of drugs in Denver. And we just have this sort of real casual conversation about it. And I said, well, keep the $110 cash, but go turn that other stuff in. And he goes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. He agreed. That's exactly what he's going to do. And I just thought, he was just so jovial as he found $110 cash, on the side of the road in this thing, in this purse. And so for reasons and that was our last conversation. And I'm happy that it was a happy one and he was happy. But for reasons that we don't know, and I'll never understand until I see him in heaven someday, is he decided to sample something that he had found.
Wow.
And we learned later, because there was an investigation. The Denver, they have a whole task force related to drug-related deaths. And so I talked to a detective, and we learned later that there was counterfeit pills in there, stuff that looked like Xanax. And he had taken Xanax before. He was familiar with it as a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just think he got tempted by something. And unfortunately, it was counterfeit. It was pressed with illicit fentanyl. And, it only takes a grain of sand worth of fentanyl to kill you. And so he sampled it. And the terrible thing about fentanyl is you do pass out, and then it basically tells your brain you no longer need to breathe. It blocks a receptor in your brain that tells you to breathe. So you go to sleep and you stop breathing. And so that's what happened to him. He was by himself in his apartment. And so we did a wellness check. We text our family. We say, I love you every day. We text, we communicate. There's constant communication going on. And so the next day, Sunday, we sent a couple texts, say, hey, how's it going? Whatever. Nothing. Monday comes around. He doesn't show up for work. So his boss calls. His boss, Ty, his older brother, was always the emergency contact. So if they couldn't get a hold of him. So eventually the call went out to Ty, his brother, on Monday. And then we still weren't able to get a hold of him. And we're sending him, hey, Ryan, just check in, tell us you're okay. And then Tuesday morning, we decided to do the wellness check, and that's when he was found. So yeah, it's a terrible thing. Something I would not wish on anybody. He was 31 years old, and just a really good human being. So we lost him. And the terrible, fentanyl is just a terrible thing. It's just terrible what's going on. And it was accidental. He didn't do anything on purpose. It was just a random thing. And so people would ask me, you think about God during this time, and and I had somebody ask me, so are you bitter? And are you bitter at God? And no, absolutely not, because God doesn't want us dead.
No.
The devil wants us dead. God wants us alive. He wants us to live. He wants us to enjoy everything, enjoy creation. That's why it was made, for us. But the devil wants us dead, and he will set very elaborate traps to kill you. And he set the most elaborate, almost impossible set of circumstances to be riding down a bike path and find something on the side of the road. He could have just been on his phone, or he could have looked in the other direction, and everything could have changed. When I talked to the Detective McKeever, super, super nice guy, there was an investigation trying to figure out, of course, where did he get this stuff? Was he dealing? They have to do all this stuff. And so I start telling Detective McKeever the story. And when I said the story, I said, he found a purse on the side of the bike path. And then before I could say the next thing, he interrupted me and said, what kind of purse was it? And I said, it was a Coach purse. He says, okay, well, I got a picture here of a Coach purse.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, what I was told and what the investigation determined, everything checked out. And so they immediately said, look, if this young man was doing something illegal and illicit, he's definitely not going to be telling his father this whole story.
True.
And it just all sort of clicked. Everything sort of came into view, what happened. And later on, they had kept his phone, and I eventually got it back. It came back in an evidence bag, which is disturbing. But I eventually got his phone back, and this is the other lesson. We need to that I learned, and that I like to remind people of, is we leave a digital trail our whole life. And
Absolutely.
so, what kind of digital trail are you leaving? Are you because your digital trail, whether you think it's secret or not, is going to be exposed someday.
Certainly can be. Yes.
It can be.
Yeah.
And so, once I had his phone, I was able to, get it unlocked, and I was able to find, and it was, there was nothing on there that was embarrassing. Nothing. I was super proud of him. I didn't find anything, just fun stuff, actually. Lots of we have treasure troves of recorded music and silly videos that he made of himself. And I mean, we have all that. But in his web search history, the last searches were blue pills with these letters on them,
Oh,
question mark. So he was researching, what he had. Those are the last things that he was on his phone saying, what is this? So his mind just became very curious about what he had, and then eventually just said, well, I'm just going to take a risk on this. And
well,
that was it.
you mentioned the devil earlier, and the first thing that popped into my mind was temptation,
Yeah.
and what an incredible force temptation is.
Yeah.
And even for the best of
Yeah.
people, temptation is strong.
Yeah.
And all the things you're telling me. Obviously, he was a fine young gentleman, and not immune to temptation.
Right. And
And go ahead.
we all struggle with things, and he had his struggles, but he was in a good place. He was in a really good place at the time this happened. So it just, the trap that
Yeah.
got set for him worked and snared him.
Well,
And
when you told me about him, we were in Miami, and first I will say the ease of that conversation impressed me to the point where I hadn't forgot about it when I asked you to do this. Your demeanor, I believe, is what more people need to hear and understand. How your faith helps you and guides you, and the way you are talking about this is, I believe, what a lot of people need to hear and understand, Scott.
there's three things, that get you through it: faith, family, and friends. And the faith part of it, none of us have ever been to heaven, and that nobody can validate it, really. You're going by what you've been taught, what you read in the Bible, and everything else. So naturally, now in my situation, I want to know Riley's in heaven. He's having a blast. He's playing drums up there and rocking the house, whatever. But you don't know for sure, right? So doubt creeps in. All these doubts creep in. Is it real? Is everything what I was I taught? Is it really true? And it's like this big funnel. So at the top of the funnel is doubt, 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 and questions and questions and questions. And you just roll this stuff around in your head. What comes out at the bottom of the funnel? Faith. That's it. You cannot have faith without doubt. It can't exist. And so you do rely on your faith. And I have no doubt that I will see him someday. I don't have a doubt about it. My faith is strong that way. And the second thing is family. Our kids are super strong. Everybody struggles. It doesn't go away. The grief doesn't go away. I don't know if it's easier. You just learn how to manage it better, coping skills, stuff like that. So, but our family's been really strong. We're really tight for each other. My son and daughter, they're just amazing human beings. And then friends.
Yeah.
The outpouring of love that we've had, and the social media I'm not a big social media person, but just the outpouring of comments and helpful and the best analogy I've used this several times when I'm talking about it is it's a weight that sits on you. You know, when you go through something like this, terrible, it's very heavy. And I can see now why people have trouble getting out of bed when they go through something terrible, because it's a physical weight. It's not, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's physical. You feel like you weigh 10,000 pounds. You cannot get up.
Hmm.
And so what I've learned is the weight never gets lighter, but your friends help you carry it. So that's the best thing.
Yeah. Faith makes you stronger.
It feels lighter because you got help carrying it.
Yeah. Yeah. What, I was going to ask you what suggestions you have for families in your position, but you just answered that.
Yeah, I say talk about it. I love talking about Riley. I love it.
Yeah.
I do not mind sharing his story. I don't mind talking about him to anybody that wants to ask me. So talk about your loved one that you lost. You know, it's, to me, that's therapeutic. And don't be afraid of saying, "Hey, I'm weak." You know,
Yeah.
don't be afraid of that. Everybody needs help. You know, you got to reach out.
You
And
mentioned a group or groups earlier. Are there any particular groups you would like to point out that people could go to for support?
so for me, there are grief counseling groups.
Yep.
There are a lot of good ones. There's books written about how to manage grief. I've read some of those. For me, though, it was just doing like you and I are doing, just sitting talking
Yeah.
and talking about the experience and kind of leaning on each other. And you know, I have friends that have lost their children. You know, and um, we've had friends that have gone through it after us, and um, so we reach out to them proactively and say, "Hey, we're a little bit ahead of you.
Yeah.
We can show you." And you know, oh, this was another amazing thing. So while you're having the whatever they call the visitation, you know, where people are coming through and you get lots of hugs and words of encouragement, all that was very therapeutic and nice. But I had a couple of friends who said, "Hey," that had one in particular that lost his son 10 years ago,
Hmm.
and who would have been the same age as Riley. He said, "Hey, I want you to call me in 30 days. I want to go have coffee or lunch with you in 30 days." And I remember thinking, I wonder why he's saying that. And sure enough, that 30-day mark is one of the toughest, because you got to go back to living life. You got to go back to work. You got to go back and, you know, everything. And that first day back to work is the worst,
Hmm.
because you kind of have to, you're faking it. You're just
Yeah.
totally faking it. You're faking happiness. You're going through the motions. And so that's why he wanted to talk to me 30 days later, because he said, "I know where you're going to be in 30 days. It's not going to be good." And so we had a very nice talk about that and got to sort of explore, like, okay, going back to normal life,
Yeah. Now what?
first part of all this. And you
Hmm.
do fake it for a while, and it's okay to fake it for a while. You got to go through the motions, and then eventually, you know, things sort of settle into a new normal.
And everybody
And
else is faking it with you too, right?
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's,
Yeah.
and that's about communication and breaking it
Yeah.
down, or giving somebody a look like, "Hey, let's
Yeah.
talk."
And I think sometimes people are a little hesitant to bring up the subject.
Absolutely.
That's totally understandable.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know how somebody's going to react. You don't want to be sitting in the middle of a business meeting and somebody say, "Hey, I'm sorry about your son," and then me start bawling right there in the middle of, you know, that would, you know, so people are a little hesitant, but I would, at least for me anyways, it's okay. You know,
Yeah.
I like talking about them.
Well,
We all got tattoos. I got a little tattoo. He had two tattoos on his
nice.
wrist: "Rise" and "Prepare."
Awesome.
You know, a spiritual thing. He also had a tattoo, which I will not get because he had this wrap, and they conquered him by the blood of the Lamb that was wrapped around his right arm
No
all the way down.
kidding.
Yeah, and when he first got his tattoos, like any parent, we were like, "Oh man, I don't know about this." You know, of course, we were not consulted, but we grew to love him.
Yeah.
We loved his tattoos. They were just like it was so perfect on him. So our family, we all got sort of matching tattoos of what he had on his body. And I wish I would have done it while he was alive because I'm now super proud of it, but I'm glad I
How
did.
about a favorite memory of Riley?
Oh my gosh, it was so many because he was just always so fun and entertaining. He played his guitar, which I have sitting behind me. We kept his guitar, and he always had that thing with him, and we'd be on the boat on Lake Michigan, and he'd be serenading us, or we'd be in a hotel room in Chicago waiting for a show, and he'd be serenading us. He was constantly singing, serenading, cracking jokes. I think just the musical memories that we have of just being him. He was also the most ridiculous hugger. He did not hug people in normal ways. It was always just big bear hugs and being picked up, and
That's
you
great.
could not hug Riley just a normal little pat on the back. That would not do for him. You got a big old bear hug out of him.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
so yeah, so those kind of things. It's just constant memories like that, and we get to look back on all the music he created and the videos, the funny videos, the amazing music. He was always too afraid to actually put something out there. He would write this music. It's like, right, that's good. Why don't you put it out there? No, no, it's not good enough. Not good enough. I can't do it. So you never put anything out there, but we have it.
Wow, that's fantastic to know and to have. Scott, thank you so much. I guess I'd like to end with maybe your insights to young folks and to be aware of what happened to Riley. If you had a group of young people in front of you, what would you tell them?
It's okay to reach out when you need help. It's okay. We have this society that says, I mean, fentanyl. It's there's people like, oh, he died of a drug overdose. And there's such a negative connotation about that. you know, and but you got a young person. I would say you're just not alone
Yeah.
in these struggles or these temptations that you have. You're not alone. You don't have to feel like you're abnormal. Okay, it's okay to talk about it. There's no judgment. I would never judge anyone who says I struggle with something, and I don't care what it is. It doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol or whatever. It could be anything. There's no judgment, and I think sometimes as a young person, you feel ashamed. You feel like I'm going to be judged because I have this issue, or I struggle with something, or I did something stupid. All of those things are perfectly normal. We all have. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage. There's no such thing as a perfect life. We all sort of try to pretend that it is. And so I think that we do our young people a little disservice, like trying to show our best side.
All right.
But I think I would tell people it's okay to be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need some help.
It's okay to not be perfect.
You'll be surprised at how many people will come to help, and you'll feel so much better about it. Like, hey, I'm not alone.
Absolutely. Scott, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your insight. Keep up the good work.
I always enjoy talking to you, Larry. I'm glad to. Good luck in your endeavor here. I admire it.
Yes.
I love it that you're doing it. So
Right.
I'm glad to be part of it.
Thank you very much. Stay tuned in, and until next time, thank you very much,
Okay.
Scott.
Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the people I know or its host. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only.